colleagues, Annelieke, Jense, TPC Leadership Global Chairwoman, and Christian Scholtes, TPC Leadership Managing Partner, Romania.
Thank you, Louis. Thanks a lot. Welcome, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Christian and myself are very excited to host you in this webinar on Build Resilience and Prepare for Recovery. As it's our privilege to have worked with so many leaders over 20 years, we just hope that we can add some values also to talk about this topic. You know, what does it entail to build resilience? We know that human health is the #1 priority for us now in the world under the current crisis. And that the longer lasting of this locked in is impacting on each health massively, and we start to be concerned about it. I think it's also important that we want to, the first connotation people have with the word resilience is often the one of personal health. We actually want to take it a little bit broader in the context of this webinar. So we would like to also take it as team health and organization health, which also involve things like driving, motivation, creativity, and that sort of element. We take it a little bit broader. The way we're going to run this webinar, we also want to give you a model, a hook to help you to reflect how am I actually dealing and using the right resources. And we want to, after that we have represented that, we would really like to be interactive. And we know you're on mute. We would love to talk to you all, but it will be on a muted format. But we will take you hand by hand, hoping that you share best practice on every element we bring into the conversation. And again, it would be really nice if you do that as a personal lens, you as individual, but also perhaps you as team leader, and also you as organizational leader, because we are very fortunate to have a fantastic audience today. I think we are still counting up, more people coming in. I think we're around 70 people now. We are from across the globe. I see people from Brazil. I see a lot of people from Europe, but also Asia, in Malaysia, and across services. You know, I see participants from professional services, healthcare organizations, industrial companies. So fantastic. Pharma, I see. Is it exciting, Christian?
Very much so. I'm very happy to co-host this webinar with you, Annelieke.
Yeah, so maybe I didn't introduce Christian properly. So Christian is our founder and managing partner of our Romanian office. Some people have met me last time. I'm the founder of our Dutch office, currently the privilege to be the global chair of our organization. After this more interactive session, where we really hope that you use the chat massively, we also want to make sure that we have time for a Q&A at the end. So it won't be long, a sort of 5 minutes, but we hope that we can deal with your questions at the same time. So I suggest we start going. Have I forgotten anything, Christian, around here?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so? I have a question for you, Christian. As the topic is building resilience and prepare for recovery, tell a little bit more about how you are dealing with it right now yourself. I know you're based in Milan, in sort of one of the hotspots, so to say, in the world, unfortunately.
Typically based in Milan nowadays for quite a few weeks now, actually. Very happy to be high up in the mountains in Val d'Aosta. So still quarantine, still very much so playing by the rules, but at least with a lovely view and lots of fresh air, which makes quite a bit of a difference to the typical Milanese environment. So that's great.
Okay. So that also helps you. If I think about myself, how am I dealing it at this moment? I think there's a lot about new routines kicking in. Routines as an individual, you know, the working in the garden and the 10 minutes yoga in the mornings, and more disciplined about timings of dinner. But also more, I think you recognize it, our organization new routines. We have many more meetings, short ones just to connect, deep dive ones where we discuss one of our priorities going forward. So I feel a lot of responsibilities to stay healthy. I just shared that I also spent Easter a day just with my husband, which was very special, and not with the children. I think we needed that too. And I think some of the audience probably can relate to that. I'm also curious, Christian. You can also look at it from a more meta lens. So if you look a little bigger, I think the whole world wants that this whole crisis provide us something. So what might it tell us about resilience in your perspective?
Well, of course, on the one hand, we have the whole tragic dimension of the current black swan, so to say. At the same time, there are lots of great things that are going on, and we maybe have also a bit of an opportunity to reflect on that. A few days ago, I was having a coaching conversation with somebody who told me that due to the quarantine, she finally enjoys her job again. That she's escaped a bit of an environment of micromanagement.
Yeah.
And she even considered to resign from the current position. And now with the newly experienced freedom to organize her job, she realized that, wait a minute, I actually enjoy what I'm doing. And in this new context, I can even thrive in doing it. And so that's a bit at an individual level. At a more systemic level, there are also some really cool implications to talk about, such as the fact that digital agendas, which have dragged in some organizations for years, suddenly got catalyzed in a manner in which, I just read recently an article with an interview from the HR for a really big global firm. They said they had the 2 years digital agenda planned ahead, and now they need to do it in a few weeks, and they're going to do it because there's no alternative. And from our company's point of view, there's another interesting implication. Now is the time for leadership. So if we have to think about the fact that we are having work relationships with people we cannot actually really track, monitor, check on at an immediate proximity level, you have to trust them, you have to build trust with them, you have to empower them, you have to redefine the whole working relationship so that it fits the current remote work kind of a context. So yeah,
I very much align with what you say. A thing I think we hear a lot is the really importance to relate, to connect, to trust each other, to have different kind of conversation, which really helps us, I think, to make meaning for ourselves, to make meaning as a team, and to make meaning as an organization. So also the whole purpose agenda and prioritization agenda has shifted, and you need to have time for this. This is also a part of I think resilience, where you start to get a sense of control about the things you can control and not about the things you cannot control. I think it's about time that we perhaps share the model we were talking about. Do you agree?
The model always helps.
Okay. This is the one. Let me put it on presentation mode. The one we wanted to share. And I think you want to say us a little bit more about it, Christian.
Yeah, in order to structure a bit the reflection on resilience and then about recovery, we got back to the research of Richard Lazarus, because he still is one of the most foremost researchers in all methods related to stress and resilience. And, simplifying a bit the theory, there are 3 variables to reflect on. First one is, how do you appraise the situation? Is it by default threatful? Is it by default harmful? How do you consider what's going on? Is there maybe something that you could do? Is there a way in which you could increase a bit the control on the current situation? So that's, the first variable. The second one is about, well, how are your resources? As an individual, how are your physical, mental, social, spiritual resources? What are the resources that the team and the organization is having in dealing with the current situation? So you have these first 2 variables, the situation and the resources, you compare them, and then you still have the choice of interpretation. You of course, to put it in more scientific terms, we're talking about emotional and cognitive coping mechanisms at a bit more of a direct language level. In this context, with a given threat of coronavirus and with available resources, is it potentially a great opportunity? Is it something that might suddenly and finally develop the leadership manifestation of yours and of other people? Is it maybe the right time to start working with purpose more than micromanagement and, you know, tracking results? So that's a bit the model in which we're going to work today.
Yes, I'll leave it for a little while up, and then I will not show it anymore. What we wanted to do with you, audience, lovely audience, which we can't hear, but we can read, is to actually explore all those three to a more detailed level. And we really want to share best practices here, because I think one of the things that keeps us going when so many things of the situations are unpredictable, are unknown, that best practices is one thing to survive and to try to be on top of things. So please help us with your, again, with your situations and with your examples. So the first question for you to feed in our chat box is, how do you increase control of your situation? And again, you can do it as a person, as an individual a professional, as a leader of a team, or a leader of an organization, whatever your function is. So how do you increase control of your situation, but also decide what is most crucial, what is the most important thing? Please, let us know. And perhaps you can help us read, Christian,
So having a bit of a fixed structure, potentially having a couple of routines on a daily basis, sleep well, oh yeah. I think that makes quite a bit of a difference, and a sense of humor. Keep a shorter time horizon. Instead of trying to focus on something that's highly unpredictable on the long term, to focus on the here and now. Jan says it helps a lot to inform myself about actually what's going on, I suppose, from good sources. Claudia says to communicate regularly with friends and with colleagues, to stay in touch. Prioritize what's really important. Have a plan for the day with lots of breaks. Do a bit of a household management, I suppose, as well, if there's such a complexity. Yeah. Determine what I can control, usually myself.
Can I share something, Christian?
Yeah,
what I've probably connects with this, and what I find very helpful, what we've done ourselves within our organization, was to indeed structure a sort of initiatives. So that I still remember one of the first meetings where we had, you know, what is really important to do. And I really love the distinctions we made between colleagues, clients, communities. And to have these structures in little task forces to bring those things forward, I think helped us to have a structure, having prioritized, and having also smaller scale meetings with little task forces that really helps to drive things forward and to take care of each other.
Reflecting on a conversation that I recently had with a plant manager in the automotive industry, this guy shared that what they're doing right now is a bit of a scenario planning, but not based on certainties, based on hypotheses. What would be a best case scenario in the current situation? What would be a worst case scenario in the current situation? And how to prepare for both these possibilities and something in between. So that's one way to increase a bit the control on the situation as well.
Yeah. And I think it's also important that we here distinguish control of the human factor and control of the engaging factor, and more control of what still needs to be done. And you also hear a lot that the human factor has been needs all this priority right now. People need to feel cared for. People need to feel connect. So I think you should split those two in a way of controlling the situation, controlling the connection, controlling what needs to be done in the business, considering the crisis. I believe we might go next to the next question, or is there anything else you want to say, Christian, at this stage?
Maybe just a bit of distinction. because between crisis management and operational continuity. Of course, we're facing this huge crisis, and there will be people dedicated specifically to how to manage this. But on the other hand, you still have the need to keep the core business going on. So as such, there's not necessarily the need to involve everybody heavily in dealing with various crisis initiatives. Some people might as well just keep on working on what's essential for, for business continuity.
Yeah. I see also a lot of, in our chat, a lot of keep on developing myself, meditate, be kind for ourselves. So there, we seem also to move a little bit to the resources we have, if I see that. Mm-hmm. So audience, another question we have for you is, then we go to the other bucket of appraising the resources we have. And actually we have different buckets of resources. So we tackle them one by one in this webinar. So the first one is, how would you build up your physical resources? And I think we already got some of those answers because I have seen sports, I've seen exercises, but please add on. So if you consider your physical shape as a resource for resilience, what is it what you actually do? What is it what you do, Christian?
Well, I realized that spending 24/7 time with my family, including a 1-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old daughter, really deserves a high level of energy on my side. So to put it very simply, the first thing that I realized that I need to prioritize is sleep, because this cannot be replaced in any other way. So whatever other temptations I might have at a late hour to still read something, to still binge watch something, maybe it's not the best choice. And to actually invest a couple more hours into sleep in order for the next day to find me fairly well prepared.
Yeah. I have from 2 clients, 2 different ones. One's on a team level, is that they as a team decided that a meeting can never last longer than an hour, because people need to stretch their legs and walk around. So they cut their meeting short. And I wonder what's the most effective time. And another thing was interesting on a more corporate level from one of a truly global organization here, is that they initiated a vitality portal. So that one portal to go to as an employee, where you find all your information about staying healthy, but also a lot of practices attached with mindfulness apps, and all ways how to structure your work, how to structure your meetings. I thought was an interesting on a more corporate level. I see a lot of walking. Isn't what you also see?
I see lots of really good ideas, such as from David, saying that, of course, look after both body and mind, and do fewer things, but do them better. It's a very interesting perspective, because it basically says, instead of engaging maybe into the same mindset as before the coronavirus, where we try to do so much in such a limited time, maybe now we have the opportunity to do a bit of a shift and do less of them, but really do them better. I really love this.
The one from David makes me laugh, because he's playing netball with his 2 daughters. Yes, netball. Getting out twice a day. I recently did indeed my meetings whilst I was walking with my headset. You know, you can do Zoom if you don't need screens. You can just continue doing the walking. Shall we go to the next one, Christian? What do you think?
How about we do that? Yeah.
Let's do that. The next one is, how would you build your mental resources? And I think mental, I would say, is about making sure that you can still use your best thinking, that you can feel like still in an emotional state where you can have good meetings and have good conversations with people. How do you make sure you have the right mental capacity? I'm very curious what people will come up with now.
There's also a bit of a question about what kind of information are you feeding yourself with? Because I find it currently unbearable to either watch TV or even read the news, given the fact that the very first 30 titles or so are by far and large all kind of depressing. So of course you still need to keep up to date with what's going on, but maybe you also have a bit of an opportunity to feed in some other kinds of information, not just about, you know.
I like to start my day with a little webinar or a little blog. There's so much inspirational stuff going on for free now where you can tap into. I think it's a fantastic start of, it really helps me as a start of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I also heard from one of the executives, one of my colleagues are coaching, that the thing he did deliberately has reflection time breaks in his agenda to really pause, to reflect, think, but also challenge the strategy. So every time re-challenge, are the things we're doing now the right things we should be doing? Are the things I am doing right now the things I should be doing? But have this sort of consequent reflection pauses in his agenda to make sure he is on top of it. I thought was very interesting.
On the mental side, I'm reading now lots and lots of contributions on the chat box about positivity, positivism, about having a positive outlook with regard to, you know, what can be done and what should be done. And to bring here a bit of a, well, a complementary, not to say counter perspective, there's also an interesting perspective brought in by Stoicism, by knowing that actually you cannot control what's going on at the macro level. You have no idea when this is going to stop. You're not setting yourself some, you know, mindlessly optimistic hopes like in 2 weeks it's going to be over, in 3 weeks it's going to be over. And at the same time, on a daily basis, you keep walking, you keep moving on with the belief that eventually it will start. You just don't know when it's going to happen, but until then you have a duty for yourself and to your beloved ones to keep on going. So
yeah, and if I could say a little bit more about it, because it sounds very sunny. If we look at, we do meditation, we walk, and we sleep, but we also have these moments where it doesn't work, where we freak out, where I'm stressed out, where I might be very negative. And I think it's also very important to say that just acknowledging that emotion is a way of dealing with it. It's this psychological concept called labeling. Instead of subduing it, taking energy to act as if it's not present, just to acknowledge it's there is the first way to recover from it. And I think we all have those phases where we probably really need it. That's my hypothesis here for the audience.
yeah, just
go ahead.
one more idea maybe. There's some really interesting research being done with people who found themselves in really terrible situations, such as being prisoners of war. And amazingly enough, they said that they would prefer, most of them, the majority of them said that they would prefer not to cancel that experience from their lives, because that particular very difficult moment of hardship got them to be better people and got them to understand what's really important and what makes a difference. And at the same time, the very same people say that they would prefer not to repeat that experience, but once it's there, it transformed them into the better themselves. So
I think that is something we cover at the end of this webinar again, isn't it? In terms of recovery, is something about the learning we are having right now. I think in sake of time, let's continue, Christian, here. So there was another bucket of resources we have not covered yet, 2 other buckets. One of them is social resources. We are social animals by nature. So what are, how do you tap into the social resources around you? And again, also take this from a team leader perspective or from a social, organizational perspective. How do you tap in the social resources that are present or that are available? Would like to hear more of you. And thank you for all the chats it's really motivational to see all the ideas coming in. Can I share one example I only heard today about a social resource? What I found really interesting, it was an HR director that said, you know, today my Zoom is open as if my office is open. and he just invited people to walk in for chats or chits or sharing a cup of coffee on a virtual basis.
Nice one.
I thought it was really nice. And he said it was actually, people took the invitation. So people walked in.
At a bit more of a personal level, I have a hobby which is called collecting watches. Not a particularly creative level hobby, but there it is. And once in a while, we watch collectors meet once or twice per year to talk about our watches and our collections and so on and so forth. Now we do it online. So we are setting up a Zoom schedule. We bring with us whatever watches we have around, and then we start talking about we were face to face, and it is so very enjoyable. It's as if, almost as if we would be still being face to face in the one or the other pub. So
yeah, I see a lot of having drinks together, having walkings together, having all this meeting. I see an interesting also, I think I pronounce your name Fija, more trust in your team members. And I think that, what we said earlier, it's so fundamental as well is to connect here. And the sense of connection is a resource in itself for you and for everyone. And the fact that everyone is working from their home and you can't see what we're doing, this trust is so elementary. So I think, thank you for mentioning that. I think that's the first basis. What is probably needed now from the human connection is to have a listening ear, but also to have trust in each other, because that provides a creativity. You're laughing.
Lovely input from Luciana, who said that one of the clients invited the staff to deliver virtual cooking classes and language classes and mindfulness practices. She organized 2 movie clubs and keeps organizing happy virtual happy hours. Isn't that so very cool?
Yeah.
To actually literally learn completely new skills while under quarantine.
Yeah, and that is where on an organizational level, I've heard from different clients, different initiatives, how they could organize also events for partners or for children to join a meeting and bring in ideas or have little exercises. So I thought it's very nice to appreciate the fact that we're all working from home, dealing with lots of other stuff at the same time. I'm still waiting till my door gets opened by one of the children, but so far so good.
I just read like one of the really big companies in this world decided to provide their learning management system not just for the employees but also for the employees' children, to partly transform it and provide through it a rich and generous channel of learning activities for the little ones. So how cool is that?
I see here cake and lots of it, but I've also seen previously about when we were talking about health that people said eat less. So that's an interesting. I hear a lot of cooking and whatever, and I also make sure that we don't eat too much. It's more complicated than we think. Christian, what about going to the last one in terms of resources?
The really interesting one.
The really interesting one, and this is about the spiritual resources we have. You have yourself, or you as your family entity, but also you and your team, and you and the organization. What are the spiritual sources you could tap into now?
Indeed, what are the roots that we find in ourselves and in others, which are a bit more transpersonal, transcendental, beyond the here and now, beyond the limitations of what's going on? How do you find higher meaning into what's going on? How do you find resources for servant leadership in these times of constraint? And for some people it may be about faith. For some other people it might be about helping others as a manifestation of higher spirituality. What is it for you? What's coming out there for you as an opportunity to build up your spiritual resources?
Yeah, getting closer to nature. It's the one I'm reading now. And it's the one also I heard lots of people about, a lot of gardening, not because you're just bored, but also just to look at how nature continues to grow and blossom and be beautiful is very inspirational for people.
Pay it forward with a smile.
purpose and making meaning. There is this, a lot of this conversation is around, you know, if, and we will move into that, if this crisis particularly would be behind us, you know, what at least do we need to have covered? I'm offering free coaching to all my clients. There's a lot of free services going around, and not because people cannot be paid for it, but because people want to contribute. Again, when we had this conversation around clients and community, it was very much, what do we want to be able to support? And not is how we can still make money. That's not the...
It turns out that pretty much all zombie movies were completely wrong, with the occasional exception of some toilet paper incident. By far and large, people have proven to be really generous kind of creatures who will joyfully help others in these moments of crisis. I'm worried for my mom because she's in Romania, she's fairly old, she's isolated according to the rules. And, you know, of course I was worried in terms of how well she'll do with shopping and daily necessities. And, you know, two young students living in the same apartment building just knocked at the door and said, if you need anything, just let us know, we'd love to do it for you. And, you know, no worries, we're here for you. Now, how cool and how kind is that?
Yeah. Even in this audience, there's a lot of offering for free webinars, offering help, also for the older generation, which you did describe. So that seems what's really helping people. And if I share something very personal, as some of my colleagues know, is that my father very recently passed away, just not because of Corona, just before that. And in a way, that's my spiritual feet at the moment. So when I look in the morning to his picture, when I look in the evening to the pictures, I don't know, it helps to, I don't know, not to make sense of it, but sort of to ask his wisdom and his calmness wherever he is now. It just helps me to stay connected with the spirituality. Difficult word if you're non-native. Anything else you would like to say, Christian, now, or to read aloud before we move on?
I just love this comment. Living spring this year like I never have before. How beautiful is that? To fully experience spring as it never has done before, because maybe as you, Saskia, and as we all, were so much on the run that we forgot that spring is happening. And now spring is here and it's absolutely glorious. Yeah. And we're witnessing it because we were forced to, you know, go to our rooms and just, you know, stop interfering with it.
I would really like to read one of our colleague, Andrew, who's also listening in, Andrew, and who is very much into this topic and wise in this topic. I think it's very important to focus on identifying a personal sense of meaning when in these sort of crises, and respect other people's sense of meaning, rather than trying to understand or hypothesize about a bigger picture meaning.
Yeah.
I like it.
We are fully entitled to have our very own personal meanings in dealing with what's going on. Yeah. Beautiful.
And
so I think...
And being curious about the other ones.
Oh yeah, to engage into dialogue. And I think this brings us to the last element of the model, actually.
Yes.
Which is about what is the interpretation that we choose to give to what's going on. If you are to distill out of it a higher meaning, a higher purpose, but you know, also in Andrew's framework, for yourself, for you personally and individually, and maybe share it with the others, what would this purpose be? What would this meaning be? I'm very curious now on your contributions. I can do here a bit of a personal sharing myself. For a very long time, I wanted to spend more time with my family and spend more time in nature and do less travel. And apparently all that I really wanted has happened. And here I am, spending lots of time with the family in nature and doing no travel whatsoever. And now I feel that I have a great opportunity to identify what's really important for me and my profession, and to take out somehow the external layers of noise and interference. So what's coming from you?
So yes, we are in the last one, the choice of interpretation, isn't it, Christian? How can you decide to have a more enabling, positive lens on what's going on?
this one seems to require a bit of reflection time from all of us. So, gift of time, still having lots of choices. Using everything that is going to identify the new normal that we can create together, getting to conversations that really matter, beautiful, building relationships that we can grow through. Yeah, I now have the opportunity to do more learning. If you ever wanted to learn how to play guitar, sounds like this is the moment.
I remember that you called it the freedom of the prisoners in one of our earlier conversations, Christian. Yeah. So there is something interesting in being locked off to really find what provides you joy, what provides you energy, which you haven't had time for a long time.
Well, I connected on the one hand with, the eternal Viktor Frankl book, which is My Search for Meaning, such a lovely and very valid book nowadays. And I also connected to my own experience of growing up in Romania in the 80s when it was a really nasty system going on. And still people were so very creative and parties were so fun. And we were having so many laughter together due to all the possible jokes about the system that we could create and invent. And, it was bad, but it was also such a great moment to actually build up real and true friendships. And somehow this is happening, not because you're constrained, but despite the fact you're constrained, you find so many sources of creativeness.
Yeah.
So
I see a lot of more time for reflection, learn more, read more. Yeah, I'm doing podcasts for fun and my own introspection. So there seems like a lot of introspection. I'm also curious if we took it more at a team level, Christian, and at an organizational level. What are other ways where you have a choice of interpretation? I, for example, see this burst of creativity coming up. And also, I think I notice that quite a people say that they feel a different level of connections with a lot of their colleagues right now. Because they start to talk, how are you doing? How are things for you at home? How is your family doing? How is your health? Perhaps things that they normally would ask less and they would dive into a meeting is now part of the agenda. Sounds not so romantic, but it's part of the conversation.
Yeah, very much so. The interpretation, potential interpretation is that maybe we just had to stop for a while and really think about what's going on. The amount of flights that were all over Europe last year was absolutely huge and very harmful for the entire environment. We were running and running and running from one thing to another. There was no stop, there was never enough. And now we are all in a sharp stop where we just have to stay and look at what's going on and maybe come up with better answers on how to do things and which things are actually that important that they really deserve to be doing. So
I'm a master of the time a little bit, Christian. So I forced us to move on, if you don't mind. And I think because we also said we want to prepare for recovery, that's also a topic for this webinar. And I think we have already come up with some. But the question I would really invite everyone, but also when you are with your team or you are leading your organization, to really have a thorough think continuously, I would say. Imagine this crisis is behind us and we have all become wiser. What would you like to be different about yourself, about how you fulfill your role, but also about how you lead your team or your company? And again, use the chats if you to inform us is how you would answer this question. And I realized, and I think I've said it before, is that, so for example, if I start talking here, Christian, is that we realize that our services for our clients will never be the same anymore. And it's not because we were not virtual before, because we did a lot of our stuff virtually. But because the whole world has become virtual, I imagine that we will design it very differently from now on. And I also think, so there's also a personal take for myself, is that what you're really about, what is really the driving factor, your purpose, it seemed like that is much more a natural conversation nowadays. And my strong wish is that continue to be a conversation like that. So I think that's, I think many more organizations will have that, hopefully have that question or that purpose much more front of mind than they used to have, and much more open to have those conversations. What do you think, Christian?
I was thinking that in the last few years, I kept, talking about VUCA at various leadership development programs, and sometimes I had the feeling that, okay, maybe I'm painting this with too much of a thick brush in terms of what can happen, like volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. I was questioning myself, maybe I make this too much of a topic. I certainly wasn't. I certainly wasn't. If anything, as compared to what's going on, I was definitely understating this topic of VUCA. And it's not just the current crisis. It will be possibly in this highly globalized, highly interconnected world, a series of black swans that we have to deal with. So to develop, VUCA-specific competencies, to learn to work with scenarios, to learn to actually do delegation and to empower people a lot to work much more autonomous, to get connected much better and get to share quality information. And last but not least, experiment a lot, because we just can't have the answers into the current moment.
Christian, we still have 2.5 minutes to go. So is there anything you can read out from the chat that is now, because I don't share my screen and read the chat at the same time?
More aware of complexity, going to do less but better. I would like to maintain this slower pace. How about that? Listen better, hear more, connect to others. People are finally realizing the power of remote working, so I hope that this will get to be more accepted and deployed. Have more clarity on what is really essential and stick to it. My prefrontal cortex would have been fully trained and become much wiser. I will pay more attention to my feelings and love myself more. Isn't it true? It is so much about love, about how much we love ourselves and the others, and how we still find love to give to others at the end of the working day.
Nice. Shall I continue to show sort of the 4 messages we hope we were going to convey, of the messages we believed it might be helpful? And the first one would be prioritize what is really important, what is paramount, and which are within your control. If you want to say something, Christian, please say so. Build up the resources at an individual, team and organizational level. And we hope we gave you a bit more buckets of different kind of resources here to think about, and they are enormous. There is, make a choice how to interpret the current reality. If our emotions are caused by our interpretation, you have, I think, a responsibility to make a choice how you interpret it. But also, and this was the last question, explore what needs to be different beyond the crisis. We all want to make sure that it served a purpose in a way, and starting to reflect on it now probably helps you also to answer the first question, what's paramount to start doing right now and to prioritize.
A beautiful, beautiful contribution coming from Benoit. Look at people with more compassion, a truer desire to understand their context, and a stronger belief in their potential and creativity. Beautiful. Yeah. And Benoit once said, this crisis has come to teach us how to balance our life in a better way and to make us realize that in one way or another, we are equal, facing the same challenges. Beautiful.
Thank you so much. I think, Christian, the time is up. And I said that we were going to have more time for questions. We don't have now, but we still have a webinar to go. Here you see it, Reshape the Way We Work and Agile, by my Dutch colleague and one of our Brazilian colleagues, Paula. But if you have questions, please communicate those to them, because it would be lovely for us also to make sure that we answer those questions in the next webinar, or we just look for connection with you and we can post and blog around it. I think for now, just a massive thank you for being with us, so being so engaging and supported with lots of ideas. The recording will be there for you if you are interested. Anything else you would like to say as an ending, Christian?
Well, if you have any outstanding or any pending question, just get in touch with us via LinkedIn, also, with us personally, and I'd be happy to, continue the conversation with you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being here. Have a lovely day, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world, and thanks for your contributions.